Hey everyone, just a real quick thought here, okay? Um, with everything that's going on right now in my state and everywhere else, I'm talking about the education system and what they're allowed and what they're not allowed to teach in schools, okay? When I was a kid, we had the privilege to learn about everything in detail to a degree. We talked about Native American history, talked about civil rights, we talked about World War II, we talked about the Civil War, we talked about all those things. Okay? Now, they don't talk about shit in school. Okay? From grade school to high school, they barely talk about any of this stuff. Not even World War II. Okay? When we was kids growing up, we talked about it. Okay? I think it's important that we teach our children everything involving world and American history. Don't sugarcoat nothing. Okay? That includes critical race theory. Okay? And before you start huffing and puffing, oh, Lord forbid, not in my school, let me explain what critical race theory is, okay? Critical race theory is basically saying, okay, back then they did this shit, and this shit that caused people to think and act this way towards these people, and it progressed on and created this problem from that problem. And once they address it, then they talk amongst themselves and suggest, okay, how can we resolve this situation? How can we get past that and stop that? Okay? It's acknowledging the screw ups of the past, pointing out what caused it, how it affects everyone, and how they could resolve it. So, to better educate people what everyone goes through in all walks of life. In a nutshell, that's what critical race theory is. So, do you want your kids to have a better understanding of our history? Understand what went wrong back then and what made people think such negatively towards others? Do you want them to learn how to talk amongst everyone, no matter what they look like, and get a common ground to solve problems? Because basically that's what they're trying to do. But yet everyone is trying to not have that be taught in schools because they want everyone to stay ignorant. Okay? Well, let me explain something, okay? They're not trying to teach it to kids. They're trying to teach it to high school students where they're young, but they're old enough to understand. Okay? Now let's rewind it again. This everything that's going on now in schools lately, okay? From banning books in the libraries at school, or whitewashing and censoring what they're allowed to teach in the schools and the curriculum, is not really healthy for children. See, my son, due to medical reasons, has to be taught home at school because of his seizure conditions. Mind you, he's highly functioning autistic, which he can comprehend and understand things if it's taught to him in a certain way where he can be able to comprehend. But with me, I'm not going to lie to him about what really happened during the Civil War or World War II or what happened to the Native Americans during the Plains Wars and all that other stuff. I'm not going to lie to him. I'm not going to sugarcoat nothing to him. And with that being said, you know, he has a better understanding of things. At least here at home, I could get him to be able to see the documentaries visually from respectable people who are specialists of such aspects of history, have access to books that is in detail about such history. I have a U.S. map and a world map on our wall in our room to pinpoint areas in the world and try to explain to them that way too. We have family that left Germany before the World War One and World War Two and cracked off. They became immigrants, came here to America to start a new life. They enlisted to go back over there to fight against the enemy, the Axis and all that. And he learned that. I teach him that. I'm not, and that's something that should be done in the school. That should have been done to begin with in schools from day one. Our children should be learning about this back in, like, third grade. Talking about American history, Native American history, and all that. And learn more and more and more as you progress through. Like what we went through when I was a kid. But now everything is so backwards. How are our children going to learn to be better people if we don't tell them everything? Okay? Because when they go and try to learn about American history or any kind of history, they're not going to get the full story. And then when they get confronted with situations where they got to know about it, and guess what? They're not going to be able to answer that. Not one way or how. I mean, it's sad that, schools in Europe and Canada know more about our own history than our own kids. Even some adults don't even know much about our own history, let alone how our own government works properly. Because you have a lot of these people that don't want to face the facts that, our country was founded on a bunch of hateful shit. Well, I'm sorry, not founded, established. Okay? And I'm not lying. Anyone with a common sense and a fucking Google search could fucking find out this shit. Okay? But, I feel that, people are huffing puffing over books like To Kill a Mockingbird or The Outsiders, for Christ's sake. That's required reading. That's talking about our past. Maybe in a fictitious way, but it's not doing it in a very fairy tale way. It's telling a fictitious story about stuff that did happen. The type of stuff that happened in those stories did happen. Okay? I had friends in my family that were involved in that was brought up and raised in Tulsa, where I live, back in the day, where the story of The Outsiders took place at. And they straight up said that shit did happen. Just like you see in the movie, to a sense. The story itself is fictitious, but that's how it was back in the day. And you look at Tulsa now, it's still kind of that way too. North side, where the greasers, so to speak, hang out at, that's still a rough part of town. South side, that's still where all the rich people still hang out at. And it's evident if you come to Tulsa and look. I dare you. Come to Tulsa. Take a tour around. Go to north side. Go to south side. Hopefully you make it out a lot. I'm just saying. I'm a big history nerd. I love horror movies. I love comics. Just as much as my son does. But I'm a geek when it comes to history. You want to talk about history? I could tell you all kinds of shit. We could talk about the Holy Crusades. We could talk about Vlad the Impaler. You know, I'm just letting you know. So, I mean, well, like I said in my welcoming video on my YouTube channel, I'm a single parent. I take care of my son. I do what I can. But, you know, it pains me that we put so much money into the school system just for them to not do their job. I'm on disability, but I put my fair share of taxpaying money into the society, into the system to ensure that when my son gets an education, or any kid goes to school to get an education, they get a full education. They're not tiptoeing on eggshells. They're not trying to make sure they're not upsetting anyone. Oh, Lord forbid if we ever read this book. Or Lord forbid if we talk about our own history. Am I the only one to see how screwed up this is? And believe me, I mean, the times that my son has gone to school and discussed things with his teachers when he was able to still go to school without having his issues take over, he kind of disrupted the class a bit because he's throwing out some knowledge that he learned, whether it be with me or just from reading random science books. Because my son likes to read. As much as my son loves video games, he loves reading, which I'm very happy about. Not that many kids, let alone 13-year-olds, loves reading. You know, my son has read Edgar Allan Poe. He's read H.P. Lovecraft. He's read some Stephen King with some help from me. And he's read Frankenstein. He's read The Exorcist. He read some doozies, but the thing about it is I'm encouraging him to read, to open his mind up and stuff, and to question. Okay, we don't have that in schools no more. Some teachers are afraid to take on questions half the time from students, and some students are afraid to ask questions. Whether it be leave the schools alone. Let them teach. Let the kids grow. Let their minds expand. Okay? There's a ton of wonderful things we could teach our children about history, about science and stuff, if we just leave people's personal opinions and religious bias out of all that shit and let the kids learn. That's just my opinion. I'm sick of people trying to fucking tell what our kids can and cannot read in school. Listen, if it's a fucking porno magazine, yeah, take it out. Don't let the kids read. That's common fucking sense. But I doubt they're going to have that in the school library. And if they do, you gotta question the librarian or the people working there to begin with, right? But we don't. There's nothing like that in the school libraries. So why the fuck are we having to censor or ban books out? Okay? Shakespeare is a very required reading. It's a very important read and stuff. No sense of it being banned. To Kill a Mockingbird is a very important book that deals with racism back in the old South in the 60s. It's something that needs to be read to learn about how the mindset was back then, how people were treated back then. So that way, we look at the fuck ups back then to learn what we could do now to better ourselves. Okay, that's the point of it. Learn from past mistakes. Okay? We are human. We are destined to evolve and grow and learn. And our children are supposed to be destined to grow to be better people. Hopefully better than us. But if we cannot educate them properly, how can they? You know, and honestly, critical race theory is not really a bad thing to teach our high school kids. Keyword, high school kids. Why I say that? Because originally that's what it was intended for to begin with. And you know what? Considering the climate that we're in now, and considering how a lot of adults has failed a lot of their kids, to where they grow up and they raise their kids to be bigots themselves, I think it'd probably be best for that to be in place too, so people can realize, shit, all that shit was fucking wrong. Well, we need to fix this shit. And that's all I had to say.
I found an actual documentary on Rosewood.
Awesome. See, that's my son right there. My son found an actual documentary about Rosewood. Okay, people that don't know what Rosewood was, everyone heard about Tulsa and the Tulsa Race Massacre and all that. Well, not too long after that, in Florida, in a town called Rosewood, they had a similar incident themselves. Vin Rames was in a movie back in 1997 called Rosewood that talked about that whole entire incident, which I suggest you go watch and see. It's a really good, deep movie. But besides the point, that right there is a good example of wanting to learn about our history, okay? Learning about truth, okay? But I gotta get off here. I got some things to do. I'm gonna go in there and watch a movie with my son. I want you all to have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I want you all to stay warm, be good to each other, and take care. I'm Thomas Johnson. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.